On November 5th, 2024, Americans went to the polls, making Donald Trump the second president to serve two non-consecutive terms, and Joe Biden the second president to be quote-unquote bookended. This has only happened once before in American history, so you may be wondering what happened the first time, and why wasn't this repeated for over 100 years? This is the story of Benjamin Harrison, America's very first president to have been bookended. Hi, my name is Ben, so yes, slight conflict of interest here with Benjamin Harrison, but thank you so much for joining me. I am of course a very small YouTuber, and all subscriptions help. I recently just passed the monetization threshold, so I am very much grateful for you guys. So please, thank you so much for coming back, and I hope to see you on the next ones. But anyway, let's get into it for today. So our story starts with the man doing the bookending, Grover Cleveland. Before his second run for the White House, Cleveland was already a political anomaly at the time. Between 1860 and 1912, he would be the only Democrat to win the presidency. His victory in the 1884 election came down to really just luck. The Republican Party had nominated James Blaine, who was seen by many as the face of political corruption at the time. Blaine's reputation as a political insider really worked against him, and while he tried to smear Cleveland for fathering a child out of wedlock, at least Cleveland wasn't willing to hide it. Modern scholars definitely believe that Blaine had also done the same, except he really wasn't willing to come clean about it. Cleveland, however, openly acknowledged his past, which contrasted with Blaine's really shrewd and underhanded tactics, and made him look like a much more honest man by comparison. By Election Day 1884, America decided it was time for a change. And for the first time in 28 years, America elected a Democrat. Cleveland's first term was generally seen as successful, which made his defeat in the next election all that more surprising. Now, let's talk about the man who Cleveland had bookended. Enter Mr. Benjamin Harrison. Born in North Bend, Ohio in the year 1833, Harrison was part of a politically active family. His grandfather, of course, was William Henry Harrison, who was an early American president, although he had only served a few days because he had died of pneumonia right into his first term. He still left a big legacy on the young Harrison. Despite this, Benjamin's father also served in Congress, continuing the family's political legacy. Benjamin, however, wasn't initially set on a political career. He originally was just a lawyer who decided to move to Indianapolis, Indiana to start his career. Although he campaigned for the Republican Party, he remained just a local figure. However, that all changed with the outbreak of the American Civil War in the year 1861. Despite having no military experience, Harrison raised a volunteer regiment and rose to the rank of brigadier general and served as a general just like his grandfather. He served in many key battles in the Deep South, including Sherman's March to the Sea, and earning a reputation as a determined leader. Harrison's political rise came after the war. Harrison became a prominent political figure in Indiana, though he made a couple failed runs to become the governor. His career in law continued to flourish in spite of this, and in 1880 he led the Republican National Delegation at the Republican National Convention. Soon after, he was appointed to the United States Senate. Now, senators actually weren't elected at this time, so he was just straight up appointed by the Republican Party in Indiana. During his term, he supported pensions for Civil War veterans, rights for African Americans to education, and opposed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which all seem to age pretty well in the modern history. However, his Senate career was cut short when Democrats took control of the Indiana legislature and simply removed him from the Senate seat. In 1888, this seemed to not block his political rise, as it just allowed him to become a dark horse candidate at the Republican National Convention. James Blaine decided he didn't want to run again, which pretty much opened the door to anybody, and Harrison secured the nomination and faced off against Cleveland in the general election of 1888. The 1888 election was one for the history books. Cleveland, he did win the popular vote, but Harrison won the Electoral College. This was only one of the 5 times a political upset with the Electoral College had happened in U.S. history. Harrison's victory was nonetheless razor thin, winning the state of New York, which was the tipping point state, which means the state that allowed him to win, by less than 1% of the vote, which is tiny. Although Cleveland felt cheated, he bowed out gracefully. His wife famously told the staff to remember where all their furniture was because they'd be coming back in 4 years, and she would be right. Harrison would become known as the Centennial President, and he was elected 100 years after the first U.S. election of a U.S. president in the year 1788. Due to this anniversary, President Harrison was given a special centennial staff depicting a century of the presidency in the White House. He expanded the Union by admitting 6 new states and increased U.S. involvement in foreign affairs such as Samoa and Hawaii. Although they were not annexed at this time during his presidency, it set the stage for what was essentially the big expansion during the McKinley era. Beyond the fanfare of being the centennial president, he faced many challenges from the start. He clashed with the party leadership, which greatly weakened his political standing and made him a lot of enemies. Harrison administration, however, was a time of great technological innovation. He was the first president to bring electricity to the White House, and he was also the first president to have his voice recorded. Granted, it isn't exactly the best quality, but I nonetheless brought it to this video, so let's take a listen.
As President of the United States, I was present at the first Pan-American Congress in Washington, D.C. Believe that with God's help, our two countries shall continue to live side by side in peace and prosperity. Benjamin Harrison.
Pretty grainy stuff, I know, and we have better stuff on our iPhones these days, but hey, you had to start somewhere. Despite some impressive achievements, Harrison's presidency was troubled by domestic issues. The budget surplus from the previous administration was pretty much gone by the end of his term, and economic troubles had already been brewing. Compromises on the gold and silver debate led to great instability economically, which would lead to the Panic of 1893, which would become the worst economic disaster in US history, even surpassing the Great Depression by some metrics. And of course, his political enemies and his party losing the midterms made it very hard for him to please anybody. Unfortunately, he was also gifted a summer home in New Jersey, which many political opponents pointed out may have been a bribe. Although he wound up buying the house outright, it still served as the big smear on his campaign and served as a huge scandal. Harrison's popularity quickly dwindled. Even though he secured the Republican nomination for a re-election in 1892, the damage was really done. Cleveland had returned to the Democratic ticket, and the populist James Weaver was about to split the vote in once safe Republican areas. In the end, Cleveland won in a landslide, and it was the biggest margin of any victory within about 30 years, making Harrison to be the very first president to have been bookended. Although it was not the end of his life, his loss would be the end of his political career. Harrison's wife unfortunately passed away just before the election, and after his defeat he would never seek public office again. He returned to practicing law and even remarried. One of the few notable post-presidential achievements he had was serving as general counsel to Venezuela in a border dispute with the country of Great Britain over their colony in Guyana in South America. Harrison would wind up passing away in 1901, less than a decade after leaving the Oval Office. In summary, Benjamin Harrison was the only president to have been bookended until this year in 2024. He won the presidency through an upset victory against a popular incumbent who remained so after leaving office. Although Harrison would see an expansion of the Union that we had never seen before or since, and the increase of American influence abroad, his administration was marred by domestic issues. Spending decisions, monetary policy, trade policy, and some other issues led to his relative disappointment of a presidency. In the end, all he managed to do was set the stage for his predecessor Grover Cleveland to come back in 4 years. It would also mark the end of the Harrison family's great influence on early American politics. Thank you so much for joining for today's episode, and if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, a like or a comment below would help me immensely. Until next time, folks, hope to see you on the next one. So I am here today on the porch of former President Benjamin Harrison's house, but this is also a very fancy Victorian house, so especially for the architecture, I'm going to take a look inside today.